We've been extensively covering the fact that Marjorie Taylor Greene is attempting to leverage the threat of an ouster of Mike Johnson to get concessions / just force him out and get a different Speaker of the House. And just recently, yesterday, House Republicans had a conference meeting, and in it, there was some news made, and then I'll show you Marjorie Taylor Greene doing a little press conference of sorts to reporters, and those moments are aggravating. But first, the news that came out of this conference meeting was actually from Congressman Thomas Massie, who tweeted after it. I just told Mike Johnson in conference that I'm co-sponsoring the motion to vacate that was introduced by Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene. He should pre-announce his resignation as Boehner did so we can pick a new speaker without ever being without a GOP speaker. So now you got Marjorie and you got Thomas Massie. And what they're saying is that they want to, instead of going through the whole Kevin McCarthy debacle all over again, where everything goes into chaos as they try to pick a new speaker, they instead want Mike Johnson to say he'll resign once a new speaker is selected, and then they won't have to go through that voting process over and over and over again. Here is some reporting from CNN.
There's only one person right now who can stop us from going into what happened last fall, and that's Mike Johnson. He's cleaning the barn, that's obvious.
I'm going to really quickly pause your viewing of this video to ask you to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Just click that subscribe button, plus the like button as well, and the alert bell so you get notifications. Back to it.
So you want him to resign? You want him to resign?
Yes. Yeah, I asked him to resign.
What did he say?
He said he would not. And then I said, well, you're the one who's going to put us into this. Because the motion is going to get called, okay? Does anybody doubt that? The motion will get called, and then he's going to lose more votes than Kevin McCarthy. And I have told him this in private, like weeks ago.
Yeah, so just to continue explaining sort of the logistics of this, it's been filed, this motion to vacate the chair, but they actually have to call it to a vote for it to be voted on and for Mike Johnson to actually be ousted. We talked about in a past segment with Josiah and in segments before that, the fact that Democrats actually might save Mike Johnson and not vote to oust him if that ends up being called to a vote, if Mike Johnson concedes on some things and sort of do a trade-off there. We'll see if that ends up taking place. But right now, again, it's still, I guess, a threat, but Massie is saying, in the near future, this could be called to a vote, and thus we'll see how this all concludes. Now, here's Marjorie Greene coming out and talking to reporters, and as I was watching this, it's a 5-minute video. I won't play all of it, obviously, just a couple clips, but as I was watching the full thing, I was thinking to myself, first of all, I wasn't going to cover it, but then there's a point that I want to make generally, and it's sort of directed at MAGA, as I often do, even though very few MAGA people are probably watching the show, but please, MAGA, understand that this is embarrassing, not for us, for, yes, Marjorie Greene, but especially for you. When these sorts of stunts work, when these sorts of distractions work and make you think that Marjorie Greene's fighting for your best interest when she's not, and this is nonsense, it's not serious governance, and we'll look at the specifics of her argument here, and that will be made very clear. You could have people working to make your life better, working to get you healthcare, increase your wages, invest in infrastructure in your communities, etc. But instead, you keep siding with people who do a lot of noise making, who can prove once a week that they're more MAGA than everybody else, but they're not actually accomplishing anything. And that's why this particular House has been the second least effective in American history under Republican leadership.
What's your thoughts, ma'am?
What is your reaction? I am firmly against the plan as it stands right now. Here's what Republican voters across the country know. They know that Speaker Johnson passed a 2-part omnibus that funded Biden's open border, deadly open border policies, funded the DOJ, which has 91 federal indictments against President Trump and wants to put him in jail for the rest of his life, funded the FBI that raided Mar-a-Lago, and gave him a brand new building. Now he's telling Republican voters that he's going to put Ukraine money first, $60 billion, supposedly broken down to make it more appealing somehow.
So I'll get to what she's referring to with the foreign aid package being split into pieces in just a second, and I'll play more from this press conference. But to respond to what she said there, what she's doing is reflecting on the thing that prompted the initial filing of the motion to vacate. So that's what set this off. She's also now upset about the foreign aid package, but initially it's this omnibus. She's upset that Mike Johnson assisted in getting funding through, and specifically, I'm not. The reason I like playing a lot of clips for you is because then you don't have to wonder, am I saying, oh, Marjorie Greene said something crazy, but I don't actually show you the proof of it. You heard it right there from her. Her argument is, and we're no fans of Mike Johnson here, but somehow she's being even more absurd, is that number one, he funded, and this is so horrible. I don't know how you do this. The open border, which the border's not open. How do you fund the lack of enforcement of laws? Breaks my brain. Isn't she saying that we're not funding stuff at the border enough or something, even though Biden keeps proposing increases to the funding and laws aren't being enforced, but somehow he's actively funding the lack of enforcement? Strange. Now we'll get back to this dishonest talking point about the border from her and why it's really absurd later, because that will come up again, but inherently sort of contradictory, I feel. Then the next point is funding the DOJ and funding the FBI, which, as I've now said a few times, this is MAGA defund the police, defund federal law enforcement. And that's what she's angry about, is that Mike Johnson doesn't want to defund federal law enforcement to punish them for enforcing the law. Yes, even when the person they're enforcing the law on is an orange leader of MAGA, right? And so that's what she's saying there. She wants to attack and defund and make it to where we can't go after terrorists as effectively. Make it to where we can't go after drug organizations as effectively. Make it to where the law can't be enforced as effectively on the federal level by defunding these organizations just to serve Donald Trump. That's how absurd this argument is. And if you're for that, you're not for law and order. You're not for our justice system being strong and legitimate. You're for using your position of power purely to further your political interests and nothing else. And that's pretty horrible. Here's more.
Ukraine has been a red line for you in the past, and you've said it even recently when you filed the original motion.
I didn't say Ukraine alone. I said we should not put Ukraine money before our border. That's what I said.
What is part of your consideration now as you decide what you're going to do here? What are you
well, I'm just processing. I'm telling you exactly what my thoughts are, unfiltered, as I walked out of the conference right there.
Councilman, do you think that the Speaker deserves to lose his job?
I don't think he's definitely not going to be Speaker next Congress if we're lucky enough to have the majority. And I think that is...
So that's the clip that made the news, her saying that Mike Johnson, if they keep the majority, won't be Speaker next session. But that's the clip that people need to see. The part where she's essentially saying her and her hardliner friends, if Republicans keep the majority, they'll get to choose who the Speaker is, because they'll hold out their vote until they get someone even more MAGA than Mike. Even more MAGA than MAGA Mike. And that should frighten Americans, the idea of Marjorie Greene wanting someone even more to her liking than Mike Johnson as Speaker, and that would be a priority going into this next year if they keep the majority. They cannot keep the majority. We would much prefer a Speaker, Hakeem Jeffries, and things could actually start happening again that are productive in the House of Representatives. Now, the other reporter asked about Ukraine, and Marjorie responded saying that no, what she said is that we shouldn't put Ukraine's border above ours in our prioritization of issues. And it's a really dishonest equating of a military invasion of another country, attempting to take over that country, and undocumented immigration to the United States. Just crazy talking point, crazy premise to that talking point, I guess is how to say it. But it also relies on this really illogical argument being made by Marjorie Greene and actually Mike Johnson too, which is Biden requested foreign aid, one of the things being Ukraine aid. And then you started hearing this talking point, oh, we're not going to fund the defense of Ukraine's border before we fund our border. And I explained why that talking point aggravates me already. And then Biden, Democrats, some bipartisan Republicans like Oklahoma Senator James Langford, and at the time Katie Britt, and then she flipped on it, and Chuck Schumer worked on negotiating a bill for that reason. Okay, if we need to do legislation, let's do legislation to address the southern border. And that's what they did. They brought it forward, and then MAGA Republicans killed it. And now they're saying we can't do anything for Ukraine until we do something for the border. But you're the one who killed the border deal. How is Biden supposed to get around that? It's an impossible logic. We're going to prevent you from doing the thing that we say you have to do anything else. Pretty crazy stuff. That's MAGA logic right there. And then to return to what I mentioned earlier about this foreign aid package, Mike Johnson's solution, what he's trying to do to placate everyone's party, is still bring the foreign aid to a vote, because there's a big portion of his party who wants that, but then break it up into individual votes. And then depending on what gets through after voting individual in Ukraine, Israel, Taiwan, then whatever it did get through will be smushed together and given to the Senate. That's the solution that he's going with. And Marjorie Greene saying she's still unhappy with that. Now, to return to my point about how embarrassing this is, I wish MAGA, you would realize, as I said earlier, that this is just a distraction trying to convince you like she's fighting for you, or that she's fighting for you when she's obviously not. But you can do it. You can turn off Fox News, turn off whatever it is that you're listening to, and just take a little bit more of an objective approach and look into what it is that either party is doing, and take out your sort of rage about particular characters and figures and storylines, and just be a little bit more objective and look through what it is that Republicans have actually done legislatively, because that's what we're talking about here with Marjorie Greene. What have they been doing? And see if you can find pieces of legislation that really seem like it's an effort toward making your life better. Then go back to when Democrats had the House majority, and just, again, don't think about AOC, don't think about Joe Biden, the Biden crime family. Just think about exactly what these bills are actually doing, exactly what Biden's actually signing into law, and see how you feel. See if you approve of the actual material things that are being done. The lowering of prescription drug costs. How do you feel about that? Is that something? Medicare negotiating drug prices allows them to lower them. Capping the cost of insulin at $35 out of pocket per month for Medicare recipients. Is that something you're cool with? Okay. See if you approve of the investments in infrastructure. Roads and bridges, right? Let's do that. Updating airports. Passenger rail. Clean and reliable drinking water. These things are good investments, right? The largest federal investment under Biden in public safety, law enforcement, and violence reduction. I bet you're for that, right? Come on. Maybe that's contributing to crime dropping at a pretty rapid pace. And we could go on. The expansion of healthcare, specifically for veterans or for ACA recipients. That is how I wish more people would go through and see where they stand, because then a lot of this rhetorical and stunty sort of stuff could be ignored. But the fear-mongering works. People are getting convinced that crime's spiking when it's plummeting, that the economy's crashing when Biden's overseeing this impressive recovery since the crisis that he was given by his predecessor. And that's the really discouraging part of all this. But the fact that many of you out there absolutely get this stuff gives me hope, and I just wish some MAGA person out there could be inspired to set aside the distractions and focus on what matters, and that's how these leaders are impacting your life directly. Let me know what you thought of all that in the comments.